because usually when we're listening, we're actually talking in our head about what the other person is saying, and we're listening to our voice, that commentary, as opposed to their voice. So when you can really listen in that deep way, it's a real gift to give to someone else.
I believe the world needs a new set of real models, people who live with deep intentions behind their actions. And this is the podcast where you get to meet them, hear from them, and hear me ask them questions about life, the universe, their new work, and everything in between. Today, I'm super excited to have with me Mike Posner, an American Grammy-nominated singer, songwriter, poet, producer, and podcaster. Mike, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for being here, man. I'm really grateful. I want you to know that I really am grateful that we connected recently, and I really appreciate you being here, man.
You got it. I'm grateful we connected also.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen your videos before, so I'm like, there's the guy, man.
I was listening to your music for a long time before too, so when we got connected.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool.
And it was nice because I remember Tom, who connected us, he was like, you both have 3 billion views, so you should connect. And I was just like, I think there's a lot of other reasons we should connect too. But yeah, man, I wanted to start off by just saying, been a long time fan of your work and your music. So the fact that you let me listen to your album before this, I really appreciated. And so thank you so much for doing that. But I want to start off by, we were on a call, I think about 2-3 weeks ago, and you were in a bookstore. Which books did you end up buying? Are any of them any good?
I ended up buying A Gentleman in Moscow.
Okay.
I just finished that.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Okay, what was that about?
It's a novel about, it's fiction about a guy in the USSR in like the 20s and 30s, and he basically is sentenced to live the rest of his life in this one hotel. And it's a nice hotel, but he's not allowed to leave it ever again. Wow. And he gets into all these different things and nooks, and story takes turns and people come and leave, and it was really fun. It was really really good book. And then I bought The Stranger by Camus that I started yesterday because I just finished The Gentleman in Moscow, and I haven't been I'm not all the way in yet. Okay. But we'll see.
Okay.
And so I just started that, and then I bought Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. He has a autobiography. I bought that, and then I think I bought some. That's all I bought. I bought 3. Okay.
You read a lot?
Yeah, I have been this year. This is probably the most I've ever read. Maybe read like 20 books this year.
Wow.
It's like the most for me, but yeah, I've been reading a lot.
That's a lot in a year.
Yeah.
What's been the best one? What's been the highlight, standout one?
Honestly, I read that The Power Now by Eckhart Tolle, which was a book I avoided for a long time because it's popular, everyone talk about Oprah, Eckhart, The Power of Now. And I thought, if it's popular, it's not cool. That's why, foolishly, I always wanted to be find some
underground
secret. Exactly. So I never read it for years and years and years. And then I finally read it. I was like, oh, it's popular for a reason. It's good, man. I read that book 4 or 5 times this year. Yeah.
And we were just looking through my shelf, and you said you'd read the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
When did you read that? What did you think of it?
I read that actually when I was visiting India for the first time, the only time so far. That was a year and a half ago. I remember just getting high reading that book. Was like a physical experience reading it. It was really something else.
Amazing, man.
What was the first time you read it?
The first time I read it, I was 16 years old. So I read it that time, and at that time it was very philosophical for me. Really powerful for getting through some things I got through at 16. Then I read it again at 18. Then I read it again at 21. And then when I became a monk, I studied and taught that book for 3 years full time. So it became a huge part of my life. And even now when I'm working on writing my own book, I'm taking a lot of principles from the Bhagavad Gita and making them relevant and accessible. Actually, The Power of Now has so many roots in chapter 14 of the Bhagavad Gita.
What's chapter 14?
Chapter 14 is all about the modes of material nature. A mode that makes you focus on the past, a mode that makes you focus on the future, and a mode that brings you in the present. And so chapter 14 of the Bhagavad Gita really goes deeply into the different modes that we operate in.
I mean, we do 2 hours just on the Gita, man. You tell me stuff like that.
We could. But that's what we're going to save for our time.
Yeah. Did you ever have this experience? Like, I remember being, what city I was going to, but I was in India on a plane. I was reading it. I remember just feeling like the veil had been lifted, like all this weight came off, and I was like goofy smile on my. I felt like I took drugs just from this book, man. Did you ever have something like that?
Yeah, for sure. That spiritual knowledge can be intoxicating in a good way. It's almost like detoxifying, but in the process of that, it feels like you get intoxicated first and then it's stripped away.
Right.
But yeah, spiritual knowledge does. Spiritual knowledge is described to feeling like a consciousness shower, like bathing the consciousness, cleansing and healing and letting go of all of the other things, all the toxins, all the negative beliefs, all of the things that we've been holding on to for so long. All the false identities are stripped away. We almost get to see ourselves face to face after such a long time when we strip away and let go of all our false designations and roles that we've been playing.
Mm. And what do you do, like...
Wait, whose podcast is
I know. I just got a question for you, though.
Oh, my.
It's like, I don't know if it's like this for you, but for me, I will have that was one of them on the plane. I'll have these like flashes of very high moments. High is like the best way I can explain, where it feels like, I've heard the word satori. Do you know this word? It's like a flash of enlightenment.
Yeah.
And what do you do with that after? Am I supposed to always feel like that? Because it's almost like it ends.
Yeah.
Right? It's like I had that moment on the plane, but at some point that moment ended.
Yeah.
And I went back to a more normal or default state. And then you kind of like the default state less because you experience this other thing.
That's beautifully explained, man. Yeah, it's true. So what it's explained as in the Vedic literatures is shadow experiences. So a good example is when you're touring, let's say I came with you, I would get to experience everything like I was Mike. I'd get to be in your VIP space. If you took me as a friend, I'd get to be in your zone. I'd get to see things from your perspective. But I'm not Mike. I'm just experiencing the shadow of experiencing it through you. And in spiritual traditions, whether we're with an incredible teacher or a guru or we're with a book, that energy kind of is infectious and spills over onto us and we get that high. And then what we need to do is unpack it so that we can live that high continuously every single day. And what often happens with epiphanies or these moments is that we don't unpack them. We just let them be one-off experiences. But you can feel like that every single day if we choose to unpack and learn through that process of almost reverse engineering, like what was that moment trying to teach me? What did I really gain from it? Like, why did that happen at that state? What was I doing right? And then you can feel that way again, but it's also there to
scary,
give us...
though.
Go on.
This is the reason it's scary, is because if you're right, this is what you should spend your life doing. But if you're wrong, if you can't feel that every day, if that's not possible, this is a good way to waste your life. And not only that, you could very easily slip into hating normalcy because you've experienced this flash and you think something's wrong with not being there all the time. And I struggle with this because I go, oh yeah, well, let me unpack it. Let me do this work to get there, and I can feel like that every day. But then part of me is like, what if you can't really feel like that? What if this is what it's supposed to be like now? You know, or just make peace with this.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's both. I think it is both. I think having that flash, the fact that you've had that experience, is proof to you that there is more.
Yes.
It's proof to you that there is a greater purpose beyond our existence. There is greater meaning. There is greater fulfillment. And right now, you're totally right. Our current state is this. So if we don't make peace with this, if we don't accept this, if we don't learn to navigate this and constantly live in the chasing mindset, then yeah, we're gonna feel depressed every single day. So that's what I was just saying earlier, that the process and the destination are the same. It shouldn't be seen as separate. We see the epiphany as the destination or a milestone, when actually the process on a daily basis itself can be rewarding, you know?
Yeah.
It's like the creation of the song and the song. You can't really strip them away from each other, right?
Correct. We went right for it, huh?
Yeah.
We're like 5 minutes in.
I know. I love it. It's great. It's great, man. This is what makes this
Hit the ground
format
running.
so beautiful. Yeah, I love it. You start interviewing me though. You're the one with all the insights to share.
This is a because I struggle with this.
Yes.
This up and down, you know. And you know, I'll go on retreat or something, or spend some time. Like this summer, I spent some time in solitude at the monastery for like 12 days, and it go really high. And you come back in life, and I get tripped up, you know, I'll fight with my sister or something, you know, and it's like part of you wants to go back to the monastery where you can like control everything, but this is in life, you know, always.
And that's the
It's
beauty
like,
of
yeah,
it.
dealing with the.
And that's the beauty of it, that when you come back into reality, you get an opportunity to learn how to navigate it, taking that information, taking that insight, taking those experiences from the monastery, wherever you're taking them from, and then getting them to play out in life. That's part of the experience. I know that when I left being a monk, I actually feel I've had more reflections and realizations since leaving, because I've had to put into practice everything I learned, than when I was a monk. Because when I was a monk, it was protected. It was
harder after, I presume, right?
It was harder initially. Yes, it was harder. But then it became more fulfilling, because I really had to dig deep. I really had to rethink. And I had to approach everything with a new, fresh set of eyes and experiences. So it's actually become more meaningful.
Yeah, I'm not there.
No, neither am I. It's a daily process.
Yeah.
I'm not there either, man.
This is like, so I was on, I tell you, I was on this retreat, spent like 12 days alone. I was like all the way alone. I was in this little cabin on this monastery. You know, they drop the food off once a week in like a box, you know, and you pick, so you don't see anyone for a whole week. You know, I'm like meditating 5 to 7 hours a day. And after like a week or so, I'll get to this point where my mind got quieter, you know, where, you know, usually I look at a flower and my brain goes, so this is a rose. This is the last time I saw a rose. This one isn't quite as pretty, talking. And a few times on this retreat, I got to a point where I would hear a bird song with like a quiet mind. And it's just like cripplingly beautiful. Like I would start crying, you know, or see the moon without my mind saying anything. And like, you just can't even explain how beautiful it is. So then it's like, okay, I want to go home and like do that with people too. It's like, listen, but I can't do it. And like, when I talk with someone, my brain is going all the time. So it's like, it's like this integration.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's natural, because that space is carrying that energy, because people for decades, I don't know about the particular monastery you went to, but people for decades have been practicing higher levels of consciousness, alternate levels of consciousness in that space. So that's carried. I always say that location has energy and time has memory. So that location has energy and time has memory. So that location is carrying that energy. And the time that you spend there is carrying that memory with you. So now what it's about is being able to recreate that outside of that physical space. Because if it is an altered state of consciousness, you can carry it with you and create that state in a new space. Because it's not bound by physical boundaries.
Correct.
So it takes time, and I'm practicing it daily too. Like don't get me wrong, I'm not coming at it as a point of being an expert at all. I'm coming from always trying to create the state I want to be in, not accepting the state that is given to me.
Yeah.
It's
a real gift if you can listen to someone that way with a quiet mind. Because usually when we're listening, we're actually talking in our head about what the other person is saying, and we're listening to our voice that commentary as opposed to their voice. So when you can really listen in that deep way, it's a real gift to give to someone else. It's difficult to do. That's why it's such a gift, is because it's rare, you know.
Yeah.
I did it once with my mom. I was like meditating and she walked in and I was like, and it felt so good. Because I could recognize the things that like usually would trip me up and I would get upset or judge her about. And was just really listening to what she was trying to say behind the words even, you know. It was like this beautiful moment, you know.
Did she feel different as well?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's so hard to tell. I've had both these experiences where I've like been in one of these like flashes. There was once in Hawaii. I was with a friend of mine and it was one of those moments, you know, we weren't even talking, we were just looking out over like this cliff is beautiful. And I remember I went like this and we gave each other a hug. And then later the day he was like, man, something crazy happened when we hugged right there. Like I felt this, he felt something. And I thought, oh, when I feel something, maybe other people are too. And another time I was with my girlfriend at the time. And I had just meditated one day and I'm like feeling like high. I'm like loopy, you know, riding in the car and I was very quiet because I was like having this experience internally. And then later I talked to her about it, like 2 days later. She was like, yeah, I thought you were really mad at me. And I was like, she was in a different place. She wasn't high with me. So I never know exactly what other people are feeling. I used to think I could. I used to think, oh, they're feeling what I'm feeling always. But I don't think so. Not all the time.
It's harder, yeah.
Yeah.
It is hard. It is hard. And I think that's the challenge that we have, that when we've had a moment, an experience, our mind forces us to want to relive that experience rather than have a powerful new one. And the pain actually comes from always going to go back to where we were.
It's an
rather
attachment.
than move forward to where we can, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually where the pain comes from. The pain comes from wanting to have the same experience, not believing that there is one that can supersede that again in the future.
And also, it's impossible to have an experience twice.
Totally, 100%.
Just, you can't even do it.
Yeah. And it's just the trick of the mind.
Yeah, my mind's always doing that.
It's just the trick of the mind that's constantly trying to, whatever it is, not just spiritual experiences, any experience. Even if it's a material experience, your mind's tricking you to want to recreate it again and again and again. So we keep coming up with new ways of having the same experience.
So here's a good question for you. I'm sorry, I'm just so curious. I know you're supposed to be asking me questions.
I've got so many good questions. Anyway, go on. This is fun.
This seems to me to be like two kinds of teachers nowadays. When I think of like contemporary spiritual teachers, there's one school that says you can train your mind to think better thoughts, think more positively, get rid of like negative stories or limiting beliefs, etc. You can journal and meditate and do these things and cleanse the mind, make the mind more healthy. That's school one. And then there's another school, I feel like, that says, nope, the mind is inherently dirty. And what you need to do is recognize that you're not your mind. And maybe it's both of those things, I don't know, together, but they seem to, I have trouble because I feel like I have a toe here and a toe there. You know what I mean? It's tough because one day I'll be like, I'll notice myself thinking negative thoughts and I think, oh, I need to stop doing that. Or do I just need to recognize that's what minds do?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, that's great.
How do you think
that's an
about
awesome
that?
question, man. I'm so glad. This is a brilliant question. So I look at it from the point of the Vedas or the Bhagavad Gita and that tradition, that school of thought, because that school of thought has given me, in my research of Stoicism and my research of all alternative ways of thinking, I found a lot of good answers there. So the principle is suggested as this, that the mind, its function is to desire and want and will, right? That's the function of the mind. What's often missed out in any of these schools of thought is the position of the intelligence. So the mind is compared to a child and the intelligence is compared to an adult. And so we are not the mind. Definitely, that's for sure. We are not the mind. We are consciousness beyond the mind. But there is an interaction with every thought between the mind and the intelligence. So for example, I'll paint a picture because it's easier. Let's say you've decided that you want to go on a diet, right? Let's say you've decided you want to go on a diet, you want to eat healthy stuff. The mind sees a chocolate fudge cake. I'm picking that because I love chocolate fudge cakes. So the mind sees a chocolate fudge cake and the mind goes, I want that right now. I need to have that. Like I need that chocolate fudge cake. And you think the chocolate fudge cake's looking at you saying, eat me, right? Like you think that. And so the mind's having this whole conversation. The mind thinks back to every time it's had chocolate fudge cake and how happy it feels when it has that. And you think, yeah, I need to have this fudge cake. I need it. Then it's the role of the intelligence based on how much you've strengthened your intelligence. Your intelligence will say to the mind, no, we want to eat healthy. We want to be healthy. We're going to save that for cheat day. But if your intelligence is weak, your intelligence just falls over and goes, okay, let's just have And so that's actually the interaction that's happening daily in our minds. When we wake up in the morning, your mind says, I want to go to sleep. Your intelligence says, I want to wake up. Depending on how much, whichever one you've been feeding, whichever one you've been strengthening, that's the one that wins inside of you every single day. So that's one other school of thought to add to your schools of thought.
How would you, one part of me goes, well, is intelligence just another part of the mind?
Yeah, it's the more mature adult functioning part.
But even that is not really us.
It's not. It's our ability to be able to use it to steer our life in a certain way. So the analogy that's given is of a driver in a car. Like when you have a car accident, sometimes we're like, oh, that car hit me. The car didn't hit you, it hit the car. So the car's like the body. Right. The intelligence is like the engine and the system that you're using. The steering wheel is like the intelligence. And then you, the driver, are the consciousness. So each part of it is separate, but you're using a different element of it to control the other part.
And how do you think of personality in this?
Yeah, personality is a mix of the mind and intelligence.
But do you think like who we are at our deepest level is our personality part of that? Is like the personality part of the car is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think that, and I don't know, but I think that when I die, obviously my body will expire, but I think my personality will expire.
Correct, yeah.
But some essence of me will keep going.
I'm with you.
But I remember saying to someone, I was like, man, I'll feel pretty bummed like if when I die, I'm still my personality. Like, I don't want to be Mike Posner anymore. Like, with the same neuroses and the same, like, I want to leave.
Yeah, you know absolutely.
You know
No, for sure, man. I get you. We went straight in.
All the way.
We went all the way. I love it.
I'll let you ask a question now.
No. If you're still listening, I hope you're not scared. No, I'm joking. It's great. Awesome. So, yeah, anyway, I love this. This is great. We have to have this conversation offline too. So it's awesome. I love it. And we should do this again.
Me too.
But I really wanted to talk about your new album. I genuinely did. I listened to it the other day.
Thank you for listening.
And I have so many questions based on it.
Hit me.
And they're great because they are all about life, death, and the world that we live in, which I love. Like that's my fascination and fixation too, is figuring out our existence. And I feel like so many of your lyrics that I've picked out that I want to share with the audience listening and watching today, I want to share. So I'm going to pick out a few things here. So here, I want to dive straight in. I picked out a few lyrics and I want to dissect them with you. So one of your lyrics says, my heroes all die young, they hung themselves with fame, right? I want to know who are some of your heroes and how did they hang themselves with fame? What does that mean?
This is like, my heroes have kind of changed, you know, as I've gotten older. But the heroes I'm talking about then, you know, it's like growing up, like the Kurt Cobain, Tupac Shakur, you know, not really Jay Dilla, but he died young as well. Not necessarily from being famous, but, you know, these kind of guys, you know, that they're just incredible. They seem to burn really brightly for a short period of time. They don't fade out. They explode. You know? Those are the kind of guys I was referring to. But as I've gotten older, I've thought, why am I idolizing them? I should probably idolize, even if they're like myths or it's not real. It's like, I thought it'd probably be better to idolize like Jesus or like the Buddha, right? Even if their like stories are fake or myths or not entirely factual, like there's no like flaws there. Like that's a good better North Star, you know what I mean? Than like, but there is something just really, really intriguing about this kind of like, you know, genius talent that self-destructs at times, you know.
When did you first start learning about like Jesus and Buddha, and when did they start becoming your role models and why? Or your heroes?
Later in my life, I mean, the last like 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Why was that? Why did that shift happen?
I actually I met this teacher named Ram Dass. You know Ram Dass. I had a friend whose mom was sick, and she was friends with Ram Dass. And they were gonna go visit him in Hawaii, but she died. My friend's mom died. And he called me and said, hey, look, I still want to go on this trip. I want you to come with me though. So I said, okay, I'm gonna come. And I went, and we went to Ram Dass's house, and you know, he's had like a stroke, so he has like a motorized chair. He came in the room, and I had read some of his stuff and listened to some of his lectures, and he said a bunch of words I'd heard him say already, you know, like because I knew his stuff, and he said one thing that stuck out. He said, you know, he said all day long you're categorizing. You say I love this and I hate this. You're doing that all day. He goes, it's much easier if you just love everything. You don't have to categorize anymore. It's just easier. It takes less energy. And he sort of just like, he held this space. It was less about what he's saying and more about like he would look at us, these big eyes. And it felt like we could have been serial killers or whatever. He just would have loved us this way. And I remember we walked out of his house, and this was one of those high moments, and maybe one of the first ones I had where I was like, I almost like keeled over and start crying. I was just like looking around. I felt like I was in a new world, and I felt like I was in love with all the stuff, like the rusty gate and the dirt on the ground. I just loved it all. And it ended, you know, I felt like that the rest of the night, and it ended. And I didn't feel like, you know, oh, I should pray to Ram Dass now. No, I felt like, oh, this is a guy who's been doing the work for however many years he's been doing the work. And I thought, I want to be that for other people. This would be a good way to spend my life, is if I could hold that kind of space. So it was one of these moments where I thought, oh, that is possible, you know, to be in a space like that, a mindset like that people can feel, like you could feel it, you know? And so after that, I started listening to more of his lectures, and I think he made a point like this in one of his lectures, which was, you know, if you read someone else's, like if you read my book on spirituality, you're going to get all of the reasons that I am not enlightened. Does that make sense? But if you read something from an enlightened being, like the Gita or something like this, you just get that, you know. So which I read everything, you know,
Yeah,
but this is what he said, and it kind of makes sense to me, you know.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. Yeah, I remember that moment when I was 18 and I met the first monk I ever met. I had a very similar experience where my role model switched. It was the first time where I'd always looked up to celebrities and entrepreneurs and CEOs and influencers of any kind at that time when I was 18 years old. then when I met a monk, that really shifted my journey and shifted how I was aspiring to be and to do. Because similarly to what you said, it kind of opened me up to a whole alternative path that I didn't know existed. So yeah, I can identify with that. And then the end of that lyric, you say they hung themselves with fame. Tell me how you came to write that.
This fame thing is funny. I'm sure you deal with it too. Maybe better than me, but it's just so easy to get addicted to it. You know? I mean, still, like, to this day, you know, I went to the monastery, grew my beard, whatever, but I like when people like me, you know? And you can just totally self-destruct. It's like a real addiction, you know? It's like people would do anything, especially when you get a taste of it, you do anything to get more of it, you know, and can kill yourself this way. Yeah. People do, you know? Yeah. You know, the cause might be a overdose, something like this, but it's that, you know? It's, you know, like my friend Avicii died this year, you know? This kind of thing. It's a weird vortex, the fame thing to be in. You know, and I'm not like really famous. I have like some friends that are like super like I can like I walked in here, you know, like no, if someone recognized me, it's like one person. I can like talk to them for a second and like go on with my day. You know, I have friends, you know, they can't go in public. They get like mobbed. It's not like that for me, which I like. It's just you get into a weird, I feel it on tour because each night I'm playing the show, people are there
just for you,
for me, you know? So in that building, I'm like super famous, you know? And then when I go back on the tour bus, everyone that I'm living with works for me, which is it's just weird. It's not real life. And then I get used to it, and I'll go out of that vortex and expect everyone to like be waiting on me and this kind of thing. And it's like, whoa, no, that's not reality, you know?
Yeah, I want to dive into that thought that you were saying about liking being liked.
Yeah.
Like we all like being liked.
Yeah.
Is that a bad thing? Is it a good thing? And this whole process you're talking about of fame, how have you worked through it? How have you seen your friends work through it successfully? Like, what have you found? What have you learned? I know there's no perfect antidote.
Sure. The first thing that pops up is probably a survival thing, right? You know, if you're liked by the people around you, less likely to be killed by them, you know? Like,
yeah.
It makes sense that we like being liked. If it indeed is a universal thing, which I think it pretty much is. And I'll tell you the wrong way that I've tried dealing with it, and I see other people doing this all the time, from afar and from close, which is I will try to prove my autonomy by doing the opposite of what I know you like. So there was a point in my career like 2-3 years ago where I thought, everyone knows me this one way, I'm gonna do the opposite. So I feel like I'm still my own guy. I'm making my own decisions. I'm not pandering to other people. So I remember I stopped. I was eating every other day, and I lost 30 pounds. And I was already a healthy weight when I started, so I was really skinny. And I dyed my hair green. I had a green mullet. And I was doing photo shoots where I was wearing like makeup and women's clothes. And there's nothing wrong with that. They actually look pretty cool. But it wasn't, the reason was messed up that I was doing it. Not the actual thing. Some of the photos are very beautiful and this kind of thing. And the reason was I was doing the opposite to prove to myself, hey, I'm not attached to your opinion. But if you really think about it, I'm still very much attached to your opinion. your opinion is still dictating what I'm doing, even though it's the opposite of it. Instead of just me just being me. So I don't know if I explained that very well, but
Explained it really well.
I see that all the time with musicians, artists, and just people in general, where they'll be going one way and they feel themselves becoming attached to other people's approval, and so they flip 180 to prove to themselves that they're unattached. But this is actually still just another form of attachment.
Yeah. The Gita says attachment and aversion are two sides of the same coin. So that's totally right. When you're trying to be averse, you're trying to be opposite all of a sudden. Right. But it's still an attachment.
Correct.
Yeah.
The Gita says it in one line.
You explained it beautifully. Perfect. No, but you explained it beautifully.
Thank you.
It's a great point. I never even thought of it like that. I never realized that that's how a lot of people try and deal with it. That's an interesting observation. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I think I'm still figuring it out. One way I think that really helps is just the way I spend my time in a day. Make sure I'm not, take time to meditate each day, exercise just like with a couple of friends, play basketball, we go to the gym, and then you just get this time away where you're not even thinking about any of these things, and you can kind of revisit them with a little more perspective.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I take like tons of time off between albums.
2 years.
Yeah, where I'm writing, but I'm also like experimenting, exploring. I'm going to the monastery, or like I did like a Vipassana retreat this summer. Just playing around with different modes of consciousness and trying to tap into these different things, reading different books, and hopefully give a little more perspective. I know that's not a super sexy answer, but I don't know if there is
Bro,
one.
that was a great answer.
Yeah, I don't know if there is
I just
one
love
for
your it's not for me. I'm not looking for when I'm doing these podcasts with everyone listening, I'm not looking for the right answer or a perfect answer or a sexy answer. I'm looking for original, unique answers, like observing answers, and your observations are valuable to me. Your observations of your fame, the fame of others, is interesting to me. And I think it's interesting to everyone listening, because that's how we start learning about how different observations can help us, as opposed to you saying, here's my 3-step formula for how to deal with fame, which, some people have that, that's cool, but I get more fascinated by observations.
Yeah.
So I love it. It was sexy to me.
Thank you.
It's sexy to me. I'm going to move on to the next song that I put out a lyric on, because I think there's just so many, and I have to say that the music on this album is you being the same. Like when I listened to it, it made me want to focus and be curious and be an explorer of the music. It wasn't just enjoyable. I had to be more curious as a listener. And I enjoyed that process because it required more from me. And that's powerful. That's powerful.
Thank
when you
you.
feel like intrigued to listen more. So when I was doing that, I picked out this line, another lyric. I worked the last 10 years. I'm a multimillionaire, and it's supposed to all be good. And it's not all good, right?
I think you took out an expletive.
I think I did. I haven't sworn since I was 16 years old. It's hard.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That was beautiful, man.
Yeah.
For a while, I had a rubber band on my wrist, and it worked. Every time I'd curse, I'd snap myself, and then I started cursing.
Sorry,
again.
I took it off. I took it out.
No, it's great. It's great.
But here you say that. So the question I have here is, where do you think that picture of success comes from? Because you're saying that you've achieved everything that the world would have deemed. Like if you were 10 years old and someone told you you'd have all of this now that you're 30, right? You'd think that would, yeah, exactly, right? We both would have thought
I'm done.
that. Yeah, you're done. But it's not. So and I really want to talk about that. Where do we think that ideas come from? Like where was that put into our psychology?
I don't know. Because I remember my parents saying things like, money doesn't buy you happiness. you know, which is a cliche for a reason.
Sure.
That most cliches are cliche because they're probably in some way true.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember hearing people tell me this, and I'm thinking, nodding my head, but in my head going, "You just didn't make enough.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make more than you. I'm gonna take it to another level." And it's just a never-ending chase, you know. And actually, when you achieve your goals, can be in some ways more depressing than not achieving them, because you can achieve them and realize, hey, I thought this was actually going to solve like all the problems in my life. I thought my insecurities would disappear. And in my case, like, you know, I got a record deal. I had like the sports car and the house in the Hollywood Hills and the whole thing. Yeah, the whole thing, you know. And so I'm sitting there and I realized that my experience of life moment to moment is the same. I have all the same insecurities. I'm not like a different person. I'm not any happier. I'm not actually, I don't think, sadder either. But it's the same. Mm-hmm. And it's the disillusionment that came with thinking there was this magic bullet, finding the magic bullet, and then it not working. And going, oh shoot, now what? And that, I think, is what the next chapters of my life has been about, is the now what, you know? And there seem to be some promising leads on this path, you know? Like we were talking about earlier. But yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I've loved missions more than goals for so long.
Explain the difference to you.
Yeah, so the difference to me is goals are temporary milestones. A mission is a lifelong project. A mission is eternal. A goal is temporary. So a goal is, I want to be a multimillionaire. Reached. Next goal, I want to be a billionaire. Reached. Now we have trillionaires, right? Jeff Bezos is going to be the first trillionaire. So trillionaire, right? Whatever it is, like that's a goal. It's temporary. It moves. It's ephemeral. Whereas a mission is something you're committed to on a day-to-day. A goal is something you experience every so often as a milestone. A mission is something that you can experience every single day because it's a path, it's a lifestyle, it's a cause you're committed to, something that you feel responsible for, something that you feel like you're trying to drive a change or a cultural shift, which takes longer.
What's an example of a mission?
So I guess, even if let's take Martin Luther King, right? So his mission of wanting everyone to be treated by the content of the character and not the color of their skin. Like that's a mission. Like you don't just solve that overnight. Like that's something that he wanted to implant into humanity, and that can go beyond color. That can go beyond gender. It needs to that kind of thought process of loving and trusting and being compassionate and empathetic to all people is something that goes way beyond, do we have independence or do we have a goal or did we get the right policy in place, which is so temporary and doesn't necessarily push a shift. Even for myself, like my mission that I've always stated very clearly is making wisdom go viral. It's like, how do I make wisdom that has been very hidden away or has only been accessible to people who have gone to monasteries, etc.? How do I make that really accessible to everyone in the world? That's a mission. I've got to do that every day. There's no goal. There's no like, I'm never going to have a button that says, 8 billion people now have wisdom. Like, you know, it's not a number.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how I see the difference. But I love what you're saying, and I agree with you that's why I think shifting to a mission versus a goal life still keeps you motivated, still keeps you meaningful, and it moves away from numbers to emotions. You know. But anyway, that's just my thoughts.
Yeah. Good thoughts, man.
Some of my thoughts.
Those are good thoughts.
Some of my thoughts. You asked the question in one of the songs, do you ever get tired being perfect? Right? And my big question around this is, what is perfection? Does it exist? And how do you define perfect? Like, how do you see perfection, the meaning of perfection having changed in the world that we live in today?
I think what I was...
what were you hinting at?
I think, and I don't always know what I'm hinting at.
Sure.
it's kind of like sometimes the thing pops in the head and I just put it down.
Yeah.
And almost like it's not me, you know?
Oh, really? That's how sometimes the songs come out.
It doesn't feel like I'm possessed or anything, but it's like, look, you know, you have an inspired thought or a good thought. Do you really get credit for that? Because it's not like you designed the thought. That's the whole point of inspiration, is like it came
to you.
It came. And so, you know, when I write a song, it's like, I don't know if I really get credit for that. It just popped in my head and I basically repeated what I heard, you know?
Wow.
If I write a crappy song, same thing. I don't get blamed for it, you know? But, yeah, so that's like, but so, yeah, it's not always cerebral, but when I hear that back, or, you know, what I think is people that are trying to have the veil of perfection, which I've been one of those people, and I am at times still.
All of us.
You know, yeah, it's, do you ever get tired of doing that? Do you ever get tired of like trying to convince everyone that you have it all figured out? You know, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
I think.
And I think we do get tired.
It's exhausting. I had a friend, actually, we have a friend in common, NQ.
Oh, yeah.
We were talking to him because him and I do this, where we go out in social situations, and there's a little bit of a persona I'll take on. You know, even if I'm just at a party or something, or I'm doing something. I'm like trying to be, and it's very close to me, but it's not quite me. And it's not always detectable, even to me at the time. But the difference is, it's exhausting. And I'll leave a social interaction like,
Yeah.
Whereas I believe if you're being authentic and you're there, like in the Ram Dass interaction, like that was rejuvenating as opposed to exhausting.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
You ever felt that exhaustion?
100%.
Yeah.
Like, I compare it to method acting. It's like being a method actor where you've so engrossed in a role that you're trying to play that you forget who you are. And you're just playing that role the whole time. You're basically acting.
Yeah.
Just acting. Just actors. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I've done that before tons. And it's been the same for me. I think that's a great way you've put it. It's exhausting. That's number one. And the second thing is you start playing it so well that you forget who you are.
Right.
So you think it's your reality.
Right. And this, I think, is compounded going back by fame. Because with fame, look, I think that's a pretty universal thing, right? What we just talked about. It gets compounded by fame because not only are you doing an act that you think is you, other people now have an expectation of an act, and you don't want to disappoint them. So this pressure is exacerbated.
Yeah. Yeah, you're spot on. It's compounded by the fact that all these people are expecting you to show up as that person.
Correct.
And now you have to show up as that person even if you don't feel like that person today.
Correct.
Yeah, it's like having to put on a Halloween suit every day, as in like having to put on a costume.
It's so funny. Like I go through so many ebbs and flows every day, and I don't know if this is like normal other people, but like, look, every afternoon I get kind of depressed. Every single one. Like I feel it already. Like I'll get a little tired. You know, it's like. You know, it's like in the mornings, like when I first wake up, I'm like kind of sluggish. Then I'll like meditate, I'll exercise, and then I'm up, you know, and I feel like kind of high in the morning. And it's like this all the time. And there's all these colors and emotions and shades of colors of how I feel each day. And then I'll have like one song of the thousands of songs I write that becomes super famous. That's a glimpse, you know, just like a snapshot of one of those moments. And then there's the expectation that that's you. You know, it's like 11, 13, 3 years ago on a Tuesday. That's you. It's like, no, that's me at 11, 13, 3 years ago. That's who I was right then.
Wow.
But this is me, you know.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's great. And I think you just repeating that and saying that is putting that message more out into the world for everyone else who's listening to actually get that message too. That let's not be defined by just that one glimpse of our life, whether it's good or bad even, right? Because we just let ourselves be defined.
Yeah, a human being is impossibly, it's impossibly complex and beautiful. At the same, there's this moment this summer, I was thinking about how, like, the difference between what's real and what's not. You know, like the microphone here, this is real. I would say for just our sake of discussion, let's say this is real. Like it exists in reality. I can touch it. It's there. And I was on retreat and I was thinking, I have this map of in my head, like what I've accomplished, what I want to accomplish, like a trajectory. But then I thought that map is not real. Because it doesn't exist anywhere but in my thoughts. Like I just made it up. In the same way that is not real, who I think I am, which to me was like my facts of my personal history, my name, my occupation, my age, mixed with like memories of emotions that I have, like emotional reactions mixed with like honestly archetype characters from movies or books, all that mashed up. That's like, that's who I am. It's like my personality. That's who I am in my head. And I thought, that's not real either.
No.
It literally does not exist. And other people have an idea of who I am, but it's not even the same one that I have in my head. And it's just, like I was spending so much energy like curating this thing in my head and like making it look perfect. But A, no one else sees it. B, it's not there. It's not a real thing, you know? It's just so silly. We do that like all day long. Like I have to do this or accomplish this or act in a certain way in order to keep this idea of myself, this picture of myself that I have looking beautiful, or add some stroke to it. But it's not there. You know?
Yeah, no, it's true. That you reminded me of literally my favorite quote. I say this everywhere because it's such an inspiration for so much of my work. In 1902, a sociologist named Cooley said that today I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am.
Right.
So we live in a perception of ourselves, meaning if I think Mike thinks I'm happy, then I feel happy. And if I think Mike thinks I'm weak, then I'll feel weak. So we're basing how we feel about ourselves on how we think others feel about us. And that's that picture you're constantly trying to mold in your mind constantly. Like, what does this person think? Okay, what do they think? What do I think? What do I add to this? And then we get lost trying to build this. And it wasn't even real in the first place.
Right.
It was just a perception of a perception.
You know, a funny flip on this is, or addition perhaps,
Go on.
is what I believe is going on in your head is a function of what's going on in my head. Does this make sense?
Yes.
So what I suspect you're thinking about is really just the crap I think about, because that's all I have. I've never been in anyone else's head. I've only been in my head. I know my thoughts. So I assume you're having these kind of thoughts. I use the example of weight, like, because when I stopped eating, I had this, like, I would get hung up on weight. I was always looking at people's weight all the time, obsessing over it. And I thought, oh, people think I look fat or this way. And I realized they're not thinking that's what I think they're thinking. And what I think they're thinking is based on what I think.
Yeah.
And so it's like, just to simplify it, it's like, in order to not feel judged, judge less. Because then, you know, if you're not walking around judging people, you won't assume they're judging you. That makes sense.
I love that. That's beautiful. In order to not feel judged, judge less.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's nice. That's great advice. That's great advice. That's a great flip. I like it. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Now, I want to talk about this because I think it's important for the album that we're talking about right now. Like, you lost someone really important to you last year, your father. There's, someone obviously extremely special to you. How's that affected, built, created this album? How have you been processing that?
A lot of different ways, in some ways real explicit, in other ways very ambiguous, and I'm sure in some ways I don't even see or understand yet. But look, I had an amazing father for 29 years. So the first thing is, like, when you have loss, you had to have at first had in order to even feel loss. So very just like gently and subtly, you can go from this like feeling of being cheated or something like this to just having gratitude for the thing being there in the first place. And look, I'm sure you do, and I certainly do. I have a lot of friends I grew up with in Detroit and Southfield that either never knew their dad or dad wasn't in their life the way mine was. And it almost feels like silly to me to be too sad because I had this amazing gift. And how could I complain about having something awesome for 29 years and say, hey, I should have had it 30 or I should have had it 31? Like, nah, man, you don't get to decide that. That's not for you to decide. So I deal with it in different ways. This is how I feel on this couch. There are other times where I'll be playing my guitar alone in the hotel and I'll start crying. And I miss him and I'll go, dang, he's really gone. And there are other times where I'll be meditating or I'll be performing. And I swear I can like feel him around. It feels like energy, such like a buzzword, but it feels like it's not like he's standing there in his body. It just feels like it's a weird thing to talk about. No good way to talk about it, but
it's not weird at all.
Yeah,
man.
I feel like I could feel him around. His energy. And the second part, there's another part of death, which is it's quite a beautiful reminder for you to get your life together. Because the real thing about death that people get tripped up on is it reminds you you're going to die. This can be a really good thing to get that reminder because it puts in perspective what really matters. And hey, am I doing, a lot of us have a list of things that we want to do when we're done doing what we think we have to do. And, when my dad died, I was like, I'm next. Like, I look just like that guy. When I look at a picture of him, he's 30, it's like, it's me, So the next guy, is me. And I started looking back at this list of stuff that I actually want to do and start doing it, start doing it. And obviously, my album is a lot. He's on my album, recordings of us talking. So he influenced my music this way, in a big way, this record. And so yeah, it's just a lot. It's a lot, it's implicit and explicit ways. He's a great guy, great man, And I the older I get, the more I understand how beautiful of a man he was. And I think about, or I see friends that like have families or kids, and really seeing what that actually entails. It's a lot, And I think about, when I was on the basketball team in high school, and I never played. I was really short, and I just sat on the bench. And he would be at every single game. He'd be the first parent there. I remember one time he said, Mike, I'm really sorry. He was an attorney. He said, I have a case. I can't move it. I'm going to miss the game. I remember thinking like, all good, man. I don't play anyways. I don't know if you noticed, but like, I just sit there and I remember it was an away game. This was like in Pontiac, which is, 34 minutes away. Our bus pulled up. And we get off the bus, we're there like an hour too early to warm up. And there's one guy in the stands. It's my dad. He's like, I moved the case, I got it. He was just always there. He always showed up, Wasn't a perfect man. No one is. But, yeah, I love that. I love that guy, man, forever. He was funny, too, man. He was a goofball, man. Silly guy and beautiful. I just this loving,
That's beautiful, man. Thank you so much for sharing so openly. And that's, for anyone who's ever lost anyone, I'm sure something that you've said here today is going to help them too.
Yeah, and another thing, I've spoken. There's a guy I know who's become a friend. He's a hospice chaplain. So he helps people die and helps families of people. And he says the one thing you can count on grief to do is to surprise you. So often we feel something, when we have this loss. And the biggest question is like, is this right? Should I be feeling this way? And the answer is there's no right. Grief is surprising. It's going to hit you when you're not suspecting it. Sometimes longer. People expect, it's been a year.
Yeah, why am I
You're
not?
good, But it's not how it works. It's not how it works. And for me, I actually wasn't even sad when my dad died. I thought, man, I had my dad. It was beautiful. He wasn't in pain. All my family's here. We're having this beautiful funeral. We're celebrating his life. I didn't cry. I was smiling. It's not wrong, right or wrong. It's just how I felt, Later, my mom was playing, 8 months later, she's playing checking her voicemail, and she's going through she gets to one of my dad when he's alive. He was sick. I lost it. I was weeping, man. Like a baby, I started weeping. It's not right or wrong. It's just we each have our own path with grief,
Yeah, I think it's so easy that with a physical scar, you watch it heal. You can see it. Mm-hmm. You know that you're applying something on it that's letting it heal, that's getting a scar on it, etc. You can see the wound getting covered and then it disappears. But emotionally, it's almost like, oh yeah, it's been a month. You must be better now. But it's, you can't see it. And so the only person who's experiencing it in different ways all the time is you yourself. Mm-hmm. And that healing process is totally unique, totally different for each person. And you can't put a time limit on it, or you can't put a expectation on it. But because we can't see it, we kind of just pretend like it's not there.
Yeah. We make up a schedule.
Yeah.
Hey, it's been a year. I should be over this now.
Yeah. Not based on anything.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
And your dad sounds amazing.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, and I'm so happy to hear you celebrate his incredibleness, for the time that you had. Uh-huh. It's so beautiful to hear that, man. It's so beautiful to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And now you're at this place where you're 30 and you talk about being stuck in the middle on your album.
That's how I feel, right?
And I feel like we've talked a lot about getting to 30 and what's happened before, and the songs and the fame and the money and all of this. Like, when you're saying you're stuck in the middle, how is your perspective currently on the next, I'm not even going to go too far, but on the next 12 months, the next, what is your perspective? What's changed? Where is that stuck in the middle song inspired by?
It was a funny thing is a lot of times songs, they'll come before I actually live them. The song will come first, and then I live out the song after. Sometimes. This is how it is with Stuck in the Middle. The last verse of this song is, people love the old me. I don't know where he's gone. too tired to be famous, too vain to be unknown. This is how I feel. Like I have a toe in both. Like, like I know becoming more famous or more successful is not really gonna change my life. But there's part of me still that like I really want like to have more hit songs and this kind of thing. It's like the grip has been loosened, but my hand's still on it. And then there's this other part of me that like doesn't care. It's like, you know, off at the monastery or where, and like I can't, you know what I mean? It's like it's the polar opposites. It's like pop star, like monastery. It's like, and like one day I'm like at the Grammys, the other day I'm like there. You know, it's like that's where like stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
But maybe my friend said to me, maybe you're not stuck. Maybe you're just in the middle.
Yeah.
That's where you're supposed to be, you know?
Yeah. I can relate to that. I love paradoxes. I myself feel like a paradox. I felt like a paradox my whole life. And I'm right in the middle too. I lived as a monk and now I do media and I feel so much. But what I do know is that in my own way, I'm refining my intentions on a daily basis, aspiring to use any platform I have for something higher than myself. Because I know myself that after having been a monk for 3 years and lived in a monastery and an ashram for 3 years, I didn't feel like I was fulfilling my purpose either because I wanted to really give what I learned. And I had this desire to share it because I can't get away with who I am as a person. I've always been driven. I've always been motivated. I've always been someone who wants to share, etc. So I can't get away from that artificially. And if I do, I'll only end up feeling useless. And then at the other end, I also know that I have to be wary that I don't get too caught up in the world because then I can lose that monk. And so for me, I couldn't agree with you more. I think being in the middle is such a beautiful place to be. It just requires a ton more work. And that's our challenge. That's how I see it. Like you're reminding me of my own challenge to myself that when you want to operate at either end, ignorance is bliss or wisdom is bliss. And then when you're trying to be in both, you're like in the middle. You're having to, make sense?
Yeah.
Does that make any sense? Yeah.
Yes, it does. Ignorance is bliss when you're like full in the world, like full hedonistic.
Yeah.
Wisdom's bliss, you're full in the monastery.
Yeah.
And like having both those in your life integrated is
that's the real work.
No small task.
Yeah. We're like setting ourselves up for the hardest thing. I'm going to have to learn from you. I'm going to have to
No, bro. I'm here to learn from you. That's why I was trying to hijack your interview and ask you all the questions, man.
No, at all, man. You've given like what I'm listening to you, like this, by the way, for everyone who's listening, when you listen to this album, which I really, really recommend that you do, because when I was listening to it, I was exploring. Like if you're fascinated by what Mike's saying on the podcast right now, if you're watching this, hearing this, when you listen to the album, you'll be able to see it mirror across. It's such a profound piece of work. It's profound. Like that's the right way to put it. And yeah, if you're a fan of Mike, or I'm sure you've heard some of his stuff. If you haven't, this is the stuff that I want you to listen to.
Thank you.
But yeah,
we spent a lot of time. It's weird making these albums. Like perhaps like a dying form of art, the album, because people don't as much listen to them through. But I sort of don't care because I do listen to albums through and I love albums. And so we spend like months on transitions and song order and transitions. Like a lot of my songs will connect, you'll see the marker go from like track 4 to track 5, but the music there's no change, there's no like break. And so, we spent like a lot of time on that. It's like, I don't know if anyone's going to listen, but like, we did.
Yeah, no, I still remember the feeling of looking forward to an album coming out and like going to buy the CD and like opening up the pack. And like, I still love listening to albums because the songs that you hear on the radio are never anyone's best songs, in my opinion. Like they're a good starting point, but they're like the taster.
Right.
They're like the free meal, but it's like you want the full experience. And with your process is different, right? Like you don't put a single out, put a single out, put a single out and test. You kind of build the whole thing because you don't want to be affected by it. That's what I read from your work when I was doing my research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's wrong to do it this way. I have friends, you know, they'll make, you know, half the album, they'll put a single out, and they'll see what people say about it, and then they'll finish the album with that information. I don't like this way. I like to do the whole thing, and I don't let anyone hear it except for my friends that are working on it. But manager doesn't hear it. No one at the record label hears it. No one until I make this thing how I think is great. And then I'll play it for a few friends I trust, get feedback. I'll go from there. If the feedback hits me in that tender place where I know that it's right, I'll address it. And if I think they're wrong in my heart, I don't address it. And then I go to a record label and say, here's my album. It's done.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's done.
It's awesome, man. I've got the 5 big questions for you that I always talk about. I want to hear you play as well, but these are 5 big questions. So the first big question is, what's the best thing you've ever let go of?
Best thing I've ever let go of.
That you're happiest about letting go of? Because you've really cleansed, you've healed your work, you're doing the work. So
I would say there's been a few times where I've moved into my van, not because I had fallen on hard times, because I felt like my possessions were weighing me down. So like, I owned a house in the Hollywood Hills, and I had a Porsche sports car, and I had like more sneakers than I even knew I had. And I remember thinking, I'm just moving to my van. I bought this like little conversion van, and I put this stuff, like some clothes in it that I needed in there, and my guitar, and it doesn't fit very much, and the rest I donated. So I would say all that stuff.
Well,
let go of it, man. And I just felt lighter.
Nice.
You know?
It's awesome, man. Question number 2. I saw that on your website you have a hate mail section.
Yeah.
Tell me how that all came about and how you deal with criticism.
I copied this from my friend Amanda Palmer.
Okay.
Who's an amazing artist and writer. For me, it was just a good way to like, when I was on social media, now I have someone post for me.
Right.
I'll write the post and then they do it, because I try not to read the comments. But before, I used to be on there, and I probably will have to go back to, because I like having dialogue with my listeners. But involved with that is reading some pretty negative things about yourself. And before, they used to just really hurt my feelings. But then I started amassing them, and I made this section on my website called Hate Mail, and I would repost. And suddenly the same message that seemed really mean and hurtful, it became funny.
Yeah.
They just became fun. And I'd like read them out loud with my mom, and we both just be cracking up, you know?
It reminds me of the last scene of 8 Mile when Eminem goes and shares all the bad stuff he already knows about himself.
Yeah, he said, tell these people something they don't know about me. They don't already know about me, right?
Yeah. And it's like when you've done that, it's like no one else has got anything left to say.
Exactly.
Because you've already said it.
Exactly.
I love that, man. Okay, question number 3. The best advice you've ever received. The first one that comes to mind.
Probably that Ram Dass advice.
I liked it.
Just love everything. It's way easier. It's way easier. Don't. I'm repeating it, but all day long, it's like, hey, I like this, I don't like this. I love this, I hate that. Just love everything. It's easier. It's less exhausting.
I love it. I love that too. Thanks for repeating it. Where do you feel change in the world is going to come from, individually, collectively, positive change? Where's it going to come from?
there has to be, I believe, an internal shift in everyone individually. I mean, look, all of us know, like, war is bad, and we know, like, we need to do more for the environment, and we know the planet's getting warmer. But our action is not lined up with our knowledge, right? It's the same thing. It's like everyone knows how to lose weight. Everyone knows. Like everyone knows what foods are unhealthy, exercise more, but still, many people with that knowledge do not lose weight even though they want to. So people there has to be a shift in I think, like what we opened up about, that we are not our minds. We are more than our minds, and how to deal with minds that have crazy thoughts. And have thoughts that don't serve us and don't serve us as a species either. And there's to be a shift to where we actually see our species as a collective. We don't really, it's like, I see the thing about someone starving in Africa, and it's like, I understand it's bad, but people don't stop what they're doing. There's still a degree of apathy there. So, and I think this is moving in the right direction. I think we're getting there, but not yet.
That's a great answer, man. And final question: would you like to play us something?
Yeah.
Do
you have a request?
Have a special. No, your inspiration. I always go with your inspiration. I don't want to think about what I think you're thinking about playing. So I'm going to let you go with your inspiration. Your answers are inspirational. So I'm excited for this.
I just stuck in.
Wow, that's amazing, man.
Thank you.
You're creating from such a deep place, man.
Thank you, man.
I'm being serious.
Thank you.
Like, I'm excited to... It's fitting. I love that song, and it's fitting that I genuinely think that if you're able to use this incredible platform that you've already achieved, and you're able to grow it only for the sole purpose of wanting to learn more and share powerful messages with the world, you're gonna have an incredible impact on people's lives, man. Like at a scale that no one else can. It's gonna be insane because you're really doing the work. And I can feel it, I can see it, and I want people to experience that. And I feel like you've been given this incredible, unique talent. Not only have you got an incredible voice, not only are you such a talented artist, but you've spent time doing the work.
Thank you.
And that's gonna transpire into people's lives if you just keep doing it, man. In the middle. That's just there.
In the middle. Not stuck.
Yeah.
Just in the pocket.
Yeah. In the middle, man.
You want to hear another song?
Yeah, go for it. I'm loving this, man. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I don't think anything matters. I don't really care at all. You wanna start a revolution, but nobody cares and everyone's tired. Work a little bit harder, and baby, so will I. You want a revolution, but nobody cares and everyone's tired. And the promenade's filled with a gray cloud. It's dripping black all over the playground. And the museum's all filled with the Snapchat. Got the head of a dog in my backpack. And underneath all my clothes is a snake skin that I stole from the temple when it caved in, cause they built it too close to the fault line. When the Capitol burned, we were all high on the beautiful mess we'd created. There's a thought in my mind, this is sacred. In the future this will all be ancient, and the water in the sink has been tainted with the urine of the governor's firstborn. On his second birthday he got a surfboard, but he crashed it ever since he's been dirt poor. So he picked up the guitar, he's trying to learn chords, and Time wrote a new constitution. Jimmy wants to start a revolution, and the people want to start it all over, cause the poets just murdered all the soldiers, and the monks have God on their shoulders, and the world's just another day older. I said Time wrote a new constitution, Jimmy wants to start a revolution. My week is wide open.
We need to, I wish there was like an audience here, man. I'm like,
next time.
Yeah, we're gonna have to, when I go do my world tour, I'm gonna be getting you to try and get you to come sing these songs, man. I'm
That'd
like,
be fun,
yeah,
bro.
because, oh, that's beautiful, man.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's always more beautiful when the person singing is seeking at the same time. So that was incredible, man. Thank you. I feel so blessed being able to watch that live.
Thank you for having
me. It's amazing.
Me.
No, I hope we're gonna continue our friendship, and
we are.
Yeah,
for sure.
And we can talk for hours and hours and hours, man. Is there anything that I always ask this because it's important to me, because like I said to you before, that this podcast is an opportunity for me to serve you, and it's an opportunity for me to help highlight the incredible work you're doing. Is there anything that I haven't let you share, you haven't been able to share, you think we've missed? There's a message that's intuitively in your veins right now that needs to come out.
I think we did it.
Yeah?
I think we got it.
Awesome, man.
For now, Wes, obviously we could talk more.
Yeah, we're going to get together again and
I
do
got
this.
questions for you, man.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. Thank you, bro. Thank you so much, Mike. The album is out. We're not sharing a date, but if you're listening to this, the album's out right now.
Correct.
So I want you to go and get it, listen to it. I promise you, if you found this conversation exhilarating and it took you somewhere, then the album will do beyond that. So please go check it out, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mike. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate you.
That was awesome.
Awesome. If you want even more videos just like this one, make sure you subscribe and click on the boxes over here. I'm also excited to let you know that you can now get my book, Think Like a Monk, from thinklikeamonkbook.com. Check below in the description to make sure you order today. Every single one of you who come back every single week to listen, learn, and grow. Now, I'm really excited about bringing you fascinating guests where we can dissect their minds, understand their concepts and theories, and figure out how to practically live their messages in our lives. And you know how much I love authors and how much I love books. And I remember seeing this on a list of books that Adam Grant and Susan Cain had published. And it immediately caught my eye because the title was Think Like a Rocket Scientist. And I thought to myself, this is cool, like who's written this? And it happened to be a former rocket scientist. And I was fascinated because obviously, as you know, my book's called Think Like a Monk, written by me, a former monk. And I was thinking, oh, here we go. We got something in common. We're trying to challenge people to think differently. And so this book immediately caught my eye. I've read through a ton of it already and can't wait to finish it. But I'm so excited that today I get to sit with the author. Ozan Varol is a rocket scientist turned award-winning professor, author, and podcast host. A native of Istanbul, he moved to America to major in astrophysics at Cornell University, then served on the operations team for the 2003 Mars Exploration Rovers project. Varol later became a law professor at Lewis and Clark College and wrote The Democratic Coup d'Etat, published by Oxford University Press. Varol's articles have appeared in outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, BBC, Time, CNN, The Washington Post, Slate, and Foreign Policy. Now, this is going to be really interesting to you guys because I know you like regular content. He blogs weekly on his website, ozanviral.com. We'll give you the link later. And Viral has delivered keynote speeches to both small and large groups at major corporations, nonprofits, and government institutions. Today, as I said, we're here to speak about his new book, which is Think Like a Rocket Scientist, the simple strategies you can use to make giant leaps in work and life. Ozan, wonderful to have you here today.
Jay, delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not every day that you get to sit down with a former rocket scientist. So this is I see this as a huge honor.
Or a former monk for me,
This is like almost the beginning of a joke, like a former rocket scientist and a former monk walk into a bar.
So true. We'll see what happens next.
They always say like a good conversation is between like people who just have really crazy, unique experiences. And I feel like this is kind of like that, like rocket scientists, at least from my uneducated brain, it's all about exploring and going outward and seeing what's possible. And living as a monk is all about going inward and seeing what's possible. And so it's fascinating to sit down with you and think about that. But I want to start off with this question as we dive into your book and talk about many things. How do you actually become a rocket scientist? Like what is the process of that? Because growing up, I didn't even know that existed. And often we kind of refer to it in some ways like a monk. We refer to it as a term that it's kind of like make-believe or imaginary or, it's not necessarily a real thing. So tell us that.
There is no college major called rocket science. There's actually probably no one with like the official job title rocket scientist. We just use the term rocket science colloquially to refer to the science and engineering behind space travel. So for example, I was an astrophysics major, but you can also become a rocket scientist by majoring in aeronautical engineering, for example. So for me, the term is used broadly to refer to people working on space travel, people working on converting the seemingly impossible into the possible.
It's great to hear that because I was thinking, wow, I was like, what if there were actually job titles called rocket scientists? it would be crazy. But tell me about this. When you decided to write this book, why did you think it was important? Similarly, like I was trying to challenge people's mindsets with my title. Why was it important for you to challenge people right now to start thinking like a rocket scientist? What is it about the thinking of a rocket scientist that is so vital and important for everyone today?
So I opened the book with telling the story of President John F. Kennedy stepping up to the podium at Rice University State. An American astronaut had worked outside of a spacecraft. 2 spacecraft had never docked together in space. NASA didn't know if the lunar surface was solid enough to support a lander or whether the communication system would work on the moon. I mean, JFK actually said some of the metals required to build the rockets hadn't even been invented. We just jumped into the cosmic void and hoped that we'd grow wings on the way up. And grow those wings we did. In less than 7 years after Kennedy's pledge, Neil and Buzz took their giant leap for mankind. And the contrast I like to draw is a child who was just 6 years old when the Wright brothers took their first power flight. So this was back in 1903. It lasted for about 12 seconds, moved 100 feet, would have been 72 when flight became powerful enough to put a man on the moon. I mean, think about that for a second. That's 66 years. That's within a single human lifespan. And that giant leap is often attributed to technology, right? This was a triumph of technology. But I don't think that's right. I think the triumph really belongs to the humans behind the technology and a certain thought process they used to turn the seemingly impossible into the possible. So I wanted to write a book about that thought process, in part because in rocket science, it's such an intimidating term, right? Hence the saying like, this is rocket science or it's not rocket science. So we tend to put these people in a corner and say, that's just reserved for geniuses, right? I don't want to know anything about that because it's too complicated. So I didn't want to write a book about the science behind rocket science, but I wanted to take these 9 simple strategies from rocket science about approaching uncertainty, about innovating within constraints, talk to people about how rocket scientists approach failure, how they approach success, and walk them through really simply how they can take these principles and use them in their own lives to make giant leaps.
Yeah, and I love that. I love how practical that is because I think for anyone, And obviously you've given a very grand example of like, when John F. Kennedy's pledging to go to the moon. But you think about even in our lives, like so many times we have ideas or dreams or things that we would love to work towards, but we kind of see it as unreachable.
Right.
And we kind of put them and leave them there on the shelf and we go, oh, well, that's never really going to happen for me. It's probably not possible. But what I feel like you're trying to do with this book, and that's what I saw when I was reading it, is that these 9 strategies that you share, they're actually like little steps to be able to make that giant leap in your own life. And I really appreciate that, because I think whenever you hear about these, especially these big statements, I think there's a famous statement from Henry Ford, and it was like, if I asked people what they would have wanted, they would have said faster horses.
That's right.
And it's like, that people don't have the vision to really bring that into reality. And I feel like you're trying to ground that for all of us through all these 9 strategies. And I love the studies that you do share and the stories that you do share in here. What was the one that surprised you the most, right? What was the outcome or the kind of principle that you actually thought, that's actually really counterintuitive. Like, you may have thought of it some way, but actually it was like, oh no, that totally blew my own mind.
I think the last chapter in the book, which is called Nothing Fails Like Success, is probably one of the more counterintuitive takeaways from the book, right? Because we tend to think of success as a good thing. I devote that chapter to explaining how success can create complacency. And I discussed 2 of the biggest disasters in rocket science history, which are the Challenger and Columbia Space Shuttle disasters, which claimed the lives of all 7 astronauts on board. And those disasters happened after NASA had experienced a string of triumphant successes. And NASA began to develop tunnel vision, even when engineers were raising their hands and saying, look, the O-rings, which were responsible for the explosion of the Challenger, they were being damaged flight after flight. And one engineer, actually, 6 months before the Challenger disaster, he wrote a memo that turned out to be really prescient. He said, if we don't do something about the problem with the O-rings, which, by the way, are these flexible rings that seal the boosters to make sure that hot gases don't escape. So they serve a critical function. He wrote a memo saying that if we don't fix this problem, it's going to be a catastrophe of the highest order. I'm talking the loss of human life. But the managers ignored the engineers' requests because they thought, look, in previous missions, we succeeded, even when there was damage to the O-ring. So as long as we repeat the process that we followed yesterday, then success is inevitable. And basically the same thing happened after the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster as well. The technical flaw was different, but the underlying cultural flaw of success creating complacency, of success creating conformity, was very much the same. And so to me, that was really counterintuitive, because our first instinct when we succeed is to start lighting cigars, right? Popping champagne corks to start celebrating. But when we do that, we fail to realize that we may have succeeded despite making a bad decision, despite making a serious misstep. And if you don't sort of sit and conduct the same type of analysis that might follow a failure, if you don't look back and say, you know what role did luck and privilege and opportunity play in this success? If you don't do that sort of reckoning, then those small little failures will eventually snowball into something that you can't control. So I think there's a lot of value to thinking of ourselves even after we succeed as a work in progress. So I think the moment you think you've made it is the moment you stop growing. The moment you declare yourself to be an expert on something is the moment that you start, making confident declarations without backing it up with the facts. The moment you think you're in the lead is the moment you just stop listening to other people. And so I think there's a lot of value to, even when success arrives, to staying humble and realizing that, you succeeded not necessarily because of your genius, but you may have gotten lucky. And if you don't fix the errors that happened in the path to that success, then those small failures might catch up to you in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's a super powerful and strong message. I think I saw this really good viral video recently. I think I shared it too on Instagram. It was a video that someone had compiled of and the tagline was "Don't celebrate too early." And it was a compilation of like swimming races, marathons, sprints, where the person just started celebrating when they were about to hit the line, and then number two came and took their place. And it's happened multiple times. And obviously that's in a very specific, race scenario. But even in life, it's so much so, I feel like, you don't learn as much when you win unless you conduct that analysis. And I remember in a very small way, I remember every time if I did well in exams, I would always regret it the year later when I'd be like, wait a minute, how did I do well last year? Like, I wish I wrote down why I did well, right? Because then I would have something to go off. And you're so right that there's such a need for that post-win analysis and the appreciation of not just luck, but the appreciation of things that lined up, the appreciation of things that just happened, not even by chance or luck, but happened because the things that went right that you didn't expect, right? And I think it's almost like when we win, we're like, oh, we expected that to happen. But when we lose, it's like, oh, I didn't expect that. And then that's when we tear it apart. No, I love that. And I agree. I think there's such a need for that. I guess a lot of people feel, and you addressed this too, a lot of people feel like they never win. And so they're more in that category of failing. And I think I've seen this quote before and seen it thrown around before called fail like a scientist. And it's almost like fail like a rocket scientist sounds even more aligned with it. And you talk about failure in the book. Tell us about how to really fail effectively, because you talk about not just failing fast, but learning fast. And I love that change. And I want to know more about that, because I think we hear a lot about, oh, just fail and it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to fail. But I'm more fascinated by how we can really fail effectively and dive into that, because I think for most people, they don't win and get complacent. We fail, but we don't learn fast enough. So let's dive into that principle.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Jay. And I think the distinction that you just mentioned between failing fast and learning fast is a really important one. Because that mantra of fail fast, fail often, fail forward is all the rage these days in Silicon Valley. I was reading that, and I talk about this in the book too, that Silicon Valley companies are now holding funerals for failed startups, complete with like DJs spinning records and bagpipes and liquor flowing freely. And, and I don't buy it. I don't buy it because, going back to our discussion with success too, when you celebrate something, you're probably not learning from it. And so to me, the goal should be to learn fast, to not fail fast. And research really bears this out too. And I said a research study of cardiac surgeons who actually get worse after they fail, after they botch a procedure. They don't get better. Failed entrepreneurs are no more successful at taking a company public than first-time entrepreneurs. It happens, we don't learn from failure because often we attribute failure when we fail to external factors. We say we failed not because I made a mistake, but we failed because it wasn't the right time, right? We failed because of the customers or the competitors or the regulators. And when we don't do that internal reckoning, then we don't learn from anything. So moving from failure to failure without really learning is a recipe for disaster. And so scientists take a very different approach to failure. To them, and this is true for successful businesses and successful people as well, failure, it can be the best teacher if you know how to approach it properly. And almost all breakthroughs are evolutionary, not revolutionary. So let me talk about what I mean by that, because you're right. A lot of people think like they're not succeeding, but they're not succeeding because their time horizon is oriented toward the short term, right? They're looking at the next week, the next month, and they're not looking, as Kennedy did, 7 years down the road, or even a year down the road. So if you look at scientific history, every single breakthrough has been evolutionary. Albert Einstein's first several proofs for E equals MC squared completely failed. Thomas Edison famously said, I haven't failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. James Dyson, the famous British inventor, he spent, I think, 15 years, came up with over 5,000 prototypes of his bagless vacuum until he found the one that worked. So we tend to be obsessed with grand openings, but the opening doesn't have to be grand as long as the finale is. And I think one of the best things that we can do, and I see this with businesses, with politicians, businesses are chasing these short-term quarterly outcomes. Politicians are looking at the immediate electoral cycle, but the businesses and the people who can calibrate their thinking for the long term know that they might have to endure some pain in the short term, that they might have to fail a few times, but if they're learning from each of these failures, if they're learning fast, that's going to be the recipe for creating something extraordinary down the road. And when I look at my own life, any success I had with the book came because of decisions I made 3 years ago, 4 years ago, not decisions I made 2 months ago. The really important decisions tend to have a long lifespan, but once you start planting the seeds, they'll grow slowly. But if you keep doing that, then they become something that's really far more than what you could have expected, which is true for the moon landing as well, right? I mean, 7 years from Kennedy's push to landing on the moon is really incredible. And it's because for once we decided to look not for the next year, not for the next 2 years, but for 7 years down the road.
Yeah, definitely. That reminds me of a statement I heard from Bill Gates where he said that we overestimate what we can do in 1 year and underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And I guess it's hard, though, to feel like when you're making a decision, it never feels right because we decide whether decisions feel right based on the result. And that's actually a mistake, I feel, because sometimes you can get a result that you didn't want from the right decision for you at the time. But I feel like so much of our decision making is given validation based on the result. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
We paralyze ourselves because we're like, I don't know if this is the right decision because I don't know what's going to happen in 3 years. So how do you make a decision regardless of trying to live 3 years ahead? Because in one sense, no one knows, right? No one can see that.
Yeah, and I want to underscore what you just said, Jay, because it's so important. It's possible to do lots of things right and still fail. And it's also possible to do lots of things wrong and still succeed.
Yes.
This happens all the time. This happens in soccer. This happens in landing a rover on Mars. This happens in businesses. But we're so obsessed with the outputs that we forget the quality of the inputs. And so, on a personal level, the thing that I do is, and the thing that I advise other people and businesses to do is to reorient their focus away from outcomes and toward inputs. So for me, for example, writing the book, if I'm thinking about bestseller lists and how many copies the book is going to sell, two things are going to happen. One, it's going to completely rob the joy out of what I do. I mean, I love writing. It's like the thing I love the most. When I get up in the morning, I spend 3 hours writing, and that's a great day for me. But once I start thinking about quantity of sales and bestseller lists, completely robs the joy away from what I do. And number two, and perhaps worse, when people start focusing on outcomes, they start making bad decisions because they try to sort of anticipate what the market is going to want and sort of cater to that. That's certainly an important part of the equation, but it can't be the only part of the equation. And so often we're so narrowly focused on the outcome that we forget about the inputs, the things that are actually going to make our work great. So I think that pivot from outcome to process is a really important one. And another useful strategy that I've used in the past too, that I've seen successful businesses use, is the pre-mortem. So to take some of the focus out of the outcome, you basically say, the pre-mortem says, let's assume that whatever we're working on failed and work backward from that to figure out what may have gone wrong. And then you sit down and say, okay, well, it failed because of X, Y, and Z. So for example, for me, the failure would be, I didn't submit the book on time to the publisher. And then I work backward from that to figure out, well, why may I have failed, right? It could be because I didn't do the research in a timely fashion. It could be because I wasn't doing the writing on a consistent basis. And then you figure out basically ways to guard against those threats. And that also has a way of, I think, identifying things that could lead to potentially bad outcomes. But really the best thing we can do is to be more input oriented and less outcome oriented. And that requires, after, by the way, both failure and success, asking the same questions. What went wrong with this success? What went right with this success? What went wrong with this failure? And what went right with this failure? That takes the focus off of the outcome and points you toward what matters, which are the inputs.
Yeah, I'm so glad we agree on that. I've actually shared something very, very similar with the book. When I get asked the same thing, it's I couldn't agree with you more. It's such a obsession with the process, because it's that obsession with the process that gives the best opportunity for the result.
Exactly.
As opposed to the focus on the result and the reward completely takes you away from this current ability to be creative. And with what you were talking about, creators, I've often described it as like selfish creators and sellout creators. So I think of like a sellout creator is a creator who's trying to pander so much to the audience that you miss out on your inner voice, which is actually what makes it unique. And then the selfish creator is kind of like the person who writes a book that only they want to read. And that we know that isn't good either, because it's kind of like, and so, yeah, finding that balance, but still always focused on the input, I think is so important before you start focusing on thinking about how to market something or put something out there. And those are some really powerful entrepreneurial tips. I wanted to ask you if you could explain what first principles thinking is and how Elon Musk has used it. Because I think that would really interest my audience as well.
Sure. So when Elon Musk was first thinking about sending rockets to Mars, to take people to Mars, he first began by shopping for used rockets on the American market. And Musk was a really rich guy. This was right after he sold PayPal to eBay. But even as wealthy as he was, rockets were way too expensive on the American market. So he then went to Russia, I kid you not, to shop for decommissioned intercontinental ballistic missiles without the nuclear warheads on top, of course. But even those were too expensive. So on one of his plane rides back from Russia empty-handed, he had an epiphany. And he arrived at that epiphany using first principles thinking. So first principles thinking is a way of cutting through assumptions that are cluttering your thinking as if you're cutting through a jungle with a machete. You're basically unlearning what you know. You're leaving behind the baggage of history to pave the way for a better tomorrow. The analogy I give in the book is the difference between a cover band and an original singer. So a cover band plays somebody else's songs, but the original singer goes back to the raw materials, the musical notes, and goes through the painstaking process of creating something new. So Elon Musk realized initially that he was playing the role of a cover band and trying to buy rockets that other people had built. And so he went back to first principles and asked himself, well, wait a minute. What is a rocket made out of? Like, what are the non-negotiable raw materials of a rocket? And how much would it cost if I just bought these on the open market and then built the rockets myself? And it turned out that it was like 2% of the typical price of a rocket, which is a crazy ratio. So he just said, screw it. I'm going to build my rockets, my next generation rockets from scratch. And first principles thinking led him, along with Jeff Bezos' space company, Blue Origin, to upend another deeply entrenched assumption in rocket science. So for decades, rockets that carried their payload into orbit couldn't be reused. They would burn up in the atmosphere or plunge into the ocean, requiring an entirely new rocket to be rebuilt. Now imagine doing that for commercial flights, right? You fly from, I'm in Portland, you're in Los Angeles, Jay. I fly from Portland to Los Angeles. The passengers deplane. Someone steps up to the plane and just torches it. Sounds crazy, but that's basically what we did for rockets for decades. And a modern rocket isn't that much more and more expensive than a Boeing 737, but space flight is so much more expensive because rockets couldn't be reused, at least not efficiently. And SpaceX and Blue Origin have both changed that. They're reusing numerous rocket stages, sending them back out to space like certified pre-owned vehicles. And so when SpaceX took 2 NASA astronauts to the International Space Station, it was a few weeks ago when we're recording this, but the first stage of the rocket that carried them into space landed back on this barge in the middle of the ocean. There's now a landing pad next to the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. And that's a new thing in rocket science because both Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos were able to look at the problem in a different light than others had done before, and questioned an assumption that so many people in the industry had taken for granted.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I had no idea. I've never heard that before. I definitely didn't know that. And it's what I like about it the most is just that I think so many of us in our life fall into the bad habit of allowing the assumptions that we hear of an industry or a group or a society or a community to become our assumptions and our reality. And it's like, almost like assumptions, just putting on other people's assumptions as if they're our clothes. And then all of a sudden it feels like there are assumptions, and they just block us from being really creative, being really innovative, and finding these solutions. And we may not even be trying to solve space travel.
Right.
But the point is that the same principle is so powerful for us, whether it's with our habits or even whether it's with what we think is possible. And I think so often we hear things like, oh, but you need money to make more money, like as an example. And it's like, oh, well, if you adopt that assumption, it means you will be waiting a very, very long time. Or
exactly.
Or we have an assumption of like, oh, no, you have to have educated or trained in this way to be in that industry, or whatever it may be. And I think you're so right that all of these things end up blocking us and just kind of wasting time. They make us waste time when we think that way.
Yeah. And what you strive for ends up becoming your ceiling, right? So if you're striving to be mediocre, then that's the best you can do. You can't always get what you want, as the Rolling Stones remind us. But if you aim a little bit higher than you have in the past, it's amazing. And especially if you're reoriented toward the long term, it's amazing what you're able to accomplish. I think many of us operate out of like jail cells of our own making. Like we're like gripping the bars, we're cursing the guards, let us out. But the door is open, actually. You can just get out and leave. But we're operating under so many assumptions. And by the way, this is not our fault. These assumptions usually come from social conditioning. They come from educational conditioning as well. Like we've been seduced into believing that flying lower is safer than flying higher, that small dreams are wiser than moonshots. And when you hear that message over and over and over again, it becomes your jail cell. I grew up in Istanbul in very humble circumstances, but my parents made me believe that basically if I worked hard for it, that anything was within my reach. And so when I was 17 years old, I learned English as a second language. I came to the United States by myself. My parents didn't speak a word of English, but they encouraged me to pursue my dream. So I remember I was 17 years old. I'd gotten into Cornell, and I was sitting in Istanbul, and I was obsessed with space. Even then, I was obsessed with space dating back to like when I was 5. And I was researching what the astronomy department at Cornell was up to, and I saw that a professor was in charge of this planned mission to Mars, what would later be called the Mars Exploration Rovers Project. And, if I was operating out of the jail cell that my society had constructed for me, I probably would have said, oh, like, it's amazing that he's working on this, and how lucky are the people that are working with him. But there is no way that I'm going to apply, right? Because what do I have to contribute? And that voice definitely appeared in my head. He said, the voice said to me, you're a skinny kid with a funny name, from a country halfway around the globe. If you send this email to him asking for a job that doesn't exist, there was no job listing, he's just going to laugh, right? Like this is a complete moonshot for you. Know your place and don't do it. But then I asked myself 2 questions, and these 2 questions I still ask myself every day. The first one is, what's the worst that can happen? And the worst that can happen, honestly, in most cases, is like everything that you care for is still going to be there. For me, like the worst case scenario was that he just never write back to my email. And even if you can come up with more answers to that, by the way, write them down. It's really powerful at writing down those possible worst case scenario has a strange way of like disempowering them. And then ask yourself also, and this is the question I asked myself, was what's the best that can happen? If you send this email, what's the best that can happen? And the best that can happen did happen, which is I landed a job on the operations team for this Mars project. And like 2 weeks later, I had front row seats to the action. And thanks in part to I taught myself how to program in high school. But I think that is really, really important, because we get in our own way in so many different ways that it's not our fault. It's so much social and educational conditioning, and it requires purpose and effort and being intentional to be able to strip away those layers of social conditioning to regain our childlike curiosity and the childlike dreaming that we used to do, which is, I think, so important and such a crucial ingredient in any success story.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I was going to dive into that, so I'm glad you shared that then, your journey to that, because I'm sure many of your school friends would have, not thought about doing something like that, or maybe some of them tried, or maybe some of them wouldn't even have envisioned it. And so often we're thinking differently to the people around us, and it's scary. It's scary to think differently to the people around you. And I think a lot of people listening or watching this can identify with that, where you feel a bit of fear because you're like, oh, maybe I'm not allowed to think like this, or maybe I shouldn't think like this, or maybe actually if I think like this, I'm going to get into more trouble. But you spoke about two things there that are really important. You talked about working hard, and obviously we hear a lot about working smart. And what I like in the book is you talk about the difference between strategy and a tactic. And you give this example of Tina Selig's $5 challenge. But the reason why I wanted to bring that up is I think that's a really important distinction, because I think in our journeys sometimes to create these moonshots, there's a big difference between strategy and tactic. And everyone tries to use the word strategy a lot. And we also try and use the word tactic and hacks a lot. But there is a big difference. So yeah, if you just explain that to us, the difference in how we think more strategically for our moonshots.
Sure. So tactics and strategy, as you said, they tend to be used interchangeably, but they actually refer to very different things. So tactics are, I should start with the definition of strategies. Your strategy is like a plan, an overall plan for achieving an objective. And then tactics are the tools you're using, the actions you're taking to actually get to that objective. And often tactics are traps. And what we see when people look for life hacks, for example, or a formula, they're asking tactical questions. They're trying to see, well, let me see what this other person did, and let me just copy and paste their tactics and expect to get the same outcome, which is usually a recipe for disaster. But strategy is very different. Once you define your own strategy, once you zoom out from the tactics to thinking about what you actually want to achieve in your life, then tactics become a lot more malleable. Then there is like so much more wiggle room in terms of coming up with different ways of achieving something. So you mentioned the $5 challenge that Tina Selig used at Stanford. If I can just recap that.
Yeah, please. I love it. Yeah.
So Tina Selig is a professor at Stanford who runs an entrepreneurship class, and she walks into a classroom and divides up the classroom into teams. And she says each team gets $5 in seed funding. And your goal, you've got 2 hours to make as much money as possible. And then you're going to give a 3-minute presentation to the class. So take a moment to think what you would do if you were in one of these teams. Now, most teams did what you might expect them to do. They took the $5 and they bought, materials for a makeshift car wash, or they went old school and started like a lemonade stand. And those teams didn't do really well. The teams that were a lot more successful asked a very different question. They realized that the tactic, which is the $5 bill sitting in front of you, was basically a worthless and distracting resource. Instead, they went back to first principles, which we talked about before, and framed the problem more broadly as, what do we do to make the most amount of money as possible if we start with absolutely nothing? So one particularly successful team ended up making reservations at popular Silicon Valley restaurants and then selling those reservation times to wealthy executives who wanted to skip the wait. And they made an impressive, I think, $300 in 2 hours. But the team that came in first realized that both the $5 tactic and the 2 hours were not the most valuable in their arsenal. Instead, they realized that the most valuable tool in their arsenal was the 3-minute presentation time they had in front of this captivated Stanford class. They ended up selling that 3-minute slot to a company that was interested in recruiting Stanford students. and walked away with like $700. And it's genius because they were asking the strategic question of like, well, what do we do? What do we have here? It's so easy to get distracted by the $5, right? So ask yourself, what is the $5 in your life? What is how do you abandon that and find the more valuable 2 hours? But even that, how do you abandon the 2 hours and find the most valuable 3 minutes that's in front of you, that's sitting in front of you, that's just looking right at you? Breakthroughs, we tend to think begin with a smart answer, but they often begin with a smart question that reframes a problem and sees it in a light that no one else is seeing it.
Yeah, I love that example. Thank you so much for illustrating again so beautifully. It's one of my favorite ones. And I absolutely love it because I think, the way you told it as well, which I thought was brilliant, it's almost like, the resource that we almost have sometimes. We're like, okay, so I've got $500 to invest, or I've got $50 to invest. And you're so right that can actually be a distraction and a limitation as opposed to a growth thing. Second of all, the 2-hour time constraint. We often tell ourselves, I've got to do this in the next 3 months. And it's just a false time constraint, right? There's no real deadline to it. And we're putting a false deadline on ourselves. And then finally, we often miss the smallest amount of time that actually could be the most valuable. When you think about 3 minutes, you're like, I've got 3 minutes to present. We've got to prepare for that. But you don't see that as an opportunity. And when you hear that example, you're like, that makes so much sense. But that's not the first thing that would come to any of our minds. I guess my question begins to think, how do we start shifting to think in that direction? What are the habits? What are the mental changes that a rocket scientist or people who are able to think like that, what are the steps that they're taking to get that? Because we're not going to get there overnight by trying to imitate that example. It's very easy to think, next time someone asks me that cool question, I'm going to try, and then we won't, right? It doesn't work like that. So how do you actually build that mental muscle that allows you to actually think like that?
Absolutely. So there's a number of things you can do. One is to first become better at asking questions. I think that's such an important skill because we live in a society that's so obsessed with answers and finding the right answer. But right answers are so cheap these days. Honestly, if by the time that you can Google and find the answer to a question on Google, the world has moved on. But being able to ask smart questions is a really important skill. And one of the ways that you can do that is to be able to sort of emulate the team that won the $5 challenge is to ask strategic questions and move away from tactics. So move away from the what you're doing to why you're trying to do what you do. So think about strategy, because once you zoom out to see the strategy, then you might be able to spot tactics that other people are missing. The second thing that I found really valuable is to bring in people into the conversation who know nothing about what I'm working on. So outsiders, basically. And outsiders have a way of asking really good questions to spot what you're missing. Because they are not wedded to conventional wisdom. They don't know the status quo. So they're going to ask you what people call quote unquote dumb questions that are actually not dumb at all, because they go to some like fundamental aspect of the problem that you're failing to see. And this is why, by the way, so many of the success stories that we just talked about are outsiders to their industries. So Elon Musk, he came to rocket science from Silicon Valley, and he learned about rocket science by reading textbooks on a beach somewhere in Rio de Janeiro after he sold PayPal to eBay. Jeff Bezos was in the finance world before he went into to start Amazon. Reed Hastings was a software developer before he started Netflix. And all of these people were able to see the holes in the thinking of the established players because they were outsiders. And so this doesn't mean that, you hire an expensive consultant or bring in an expensive speaker. It could be as simple as talking to your significant other or your friend who knows nothing about what you're working on, but presenting to them what you're thinking about and letting them ask those really simple questions that are going to jolt you out of your perspective. The story I tell in the book is about J.K. Rowling and the first Harry Potter book. When she submitted the Harry Potter, I think it was The Sorcerer's Stone, which is the first book, to publishers, they were unanimous in their opinion. They all thought that the book was not worth printing. One publisher in the UK called Bloomsbury Publishing saw promise in the book when others missed it. And the head of Bloomsbury Publishing, Nigel Newton, he saw promise in the book because he had a secret weapon by the name of Alice, his 8-year-old bookworm daughter. And so what Nigel did was to bring the first chapter of Harry Potter home with him. And he gave the first chapter to Alice. Alice read the book and she came back downstairs and went to her dad and said, "Dad, this is so much better than anything else I've read." And the input of Alice convinced her dad to write a meager £2,500 check to J.K. Rowling to acquire the rights to publish the first Harry Potter book, which, by the way, is the best bet made in publishing history, right? Because J.K. Rowling is now a billion-dollar author, all because Nigel Newton was willing to get the opinion of someone who was a complete outsider to the publishing industry, Alice, but was a member of the target audience for the book. So that's something else you can do, is to bring in outsiders into the conversation. And then the third thing I would say is to be very intentional about questioning the assumptions in your life. So ask yourself, why do I have this process? Why do I have this routine? Why do I have this habit? Why am I doing what I'm doing on a daily basis? Because we normally don't ask those questions. When we get into the habit of doing something, we're operating on autopilot, right? It's like a choose your own adventure book that always has the same ending. So it's really important to disrupt yourself from time to time and ask, why is this process in place? Why am I taking the same route to work every day? Why am I using this browser to do what I do? I mean, these are very simple questions, but if you extend them to the more important decisions in your life, it's really amazing what can happen as a result. Before we started recording, we were talking about how my book tour got canceled because my book was published on April 14th when the pandemic was wreaking havoc on the world. And, I spent 2 days just being miserable because I was basically trying to control what can't be controlled, right? I can't change the pandemic. I can't change its disruption on my book marketing plans. But then that disruption, I started asking myself the more productive questions of, okay, I can't change the hand that the universe dealt me, but what can I do with the hand that I was dealt? What assumptions am I operating under? And my assumption, by the way, which was not first principles thinking, was that authors do book tours. And that's the only reason I was doing it, by the way, right? Like other authors I admire, they publish a book, they go on a book tour. So I'm going to publish a book. I'm also going to go on a book tour. But not stopping and asking myself the more strategic question of, well, what is the purpose of a book tour? Because a book tour is a tactic, right? In service of a broader strategy of spreading the word about the ideas in the book. That is my overall goal, is to help empower people to think like a rocket scientist, to reimagine the status quo. And if I zoom out and ask myself that strategic question, the tactics become malleable. And by the way, I started to realize that the tactic of a book tour is like the $5 bill. It's not worthless, certainly not, but it's not the best use of my time. I mean, I could get on a plane and fly to New York and walk into a Barnes & Noble and sign books for 50 people and come home, and that's going to take me an entire day or two. Or I could sit in the comfort of my office, as I'm doing now, and do virtual events and virtual book launches and podcast conversations and reach a far bigger audience than I would have reached with a book tour. And often we don't question assumptions until the universe forces out of the status quo, right? Forces us out of the status quo. That's when we start questioning everything. But the people who get ahead are the ones who do that questioning before they're forced out of the status quo, before a crisis strikes. They're doing the questioning and asking these strategic questions to themselves before crisis comes knocking on the door. So you have to, in many cases, dig the well before you're thirsty, and think through your outdated assumptions before the universe does it for you.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you for that very thoughtful set of steps and thoughts that we can go to. And it all comes back down to asking the right questions. And
yeah.
And that's what we forget. You're right. Like when you ask yourself the wrong question, you get lost in a whole trajectory. Like the wrong question of like, okay, well, what are what are other authors doing that I have to do, right? Like that question is what leads you down this whole trajectory of planning and building and traveling. And then you coming back from all of that and go, wait a minute, that didn't make any sense. And so, or not that it didn't make any sense, it wasn't right and appropriate for the current time that we're in. And I couldn't agree with you more. So I'm hoping that everyone who's listening right now, there's a lot of subtext in what Ozan's telling us around just, really looking at the decisions you're making in your life right now, really reflecting about the steps you're taking in your life right now, and just questioning why you're doing them, what you're doing them for, why they make sense. And if you don't have a good enough answer for yourself, and that's really the most important answer, is can you answer it for yourself? Because someone else may have a perfect reason for why they think you should do something. But if you don't have a good enough reason for why you think you should do it, then it's probably not as strong as you believe it is. So, Ozan, I've got a few more questions for you before we round up. I want to ask you this question from the book. Why do you suggest we use Lisa Bedell's Kill the Company exercise? Because I love it too. It's another great example from the book.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite exercises. And the story I tell in the book is from Merck and how Merck's CEO Kenneth Frazier applied it. But basically, he asked his executives to play the role of one of Merck's top competitors for a day. And so they switched perspectives and they figured out ways to kill the company, to put Merck out of business, which is when CEOs talk about change and innovation, they're asking usually the cliche questions like, how do we think outside the box? Or what's the next big thing? But those cliche questions tend to generate cliche answers. But if you play this game of kill the company and you ask your executives to come up with ways to put the company out of business, then they are, by definition, moving out of the current perspective, moving outside of the box, and looking at the box from the perspective of a competitor seeking to destroy it. Now, that's the first part of the exercise. Once you identify those threats, then you switch to the opposite perspective. So they went back to being Merck executives and figured out ways to defend against those threats. And you don't have to be a big corporation to apply that in your own life. You can ask yourself, you can play the kill the company game with your job, right? You can say, well, why might my boss pass me up for a promotion? Why may I not get this job that I'm interviewing for? Or why are people buying our competitors' products? It's not because you're right and they're wrong. It's not because they're stupid. It's because they're seeing something that you're not seeing. It's because they believe something that you don't believe. It's because they're telling themselves a different story. And you're not going to be able to see that story if you're looking at the world from your own limited perspective. And Kill the Company is a great way of forcing yourself out of that perspective and adopting the perspective of somebody else.
Yeah, I think it's a great activity to do with yourself, to do with your teams, to do with anyone, because it actually allows you to think so big and broad and crazy, which being told to think outside of the box definitely doesn't do. Yeah, exactly. Or to have a creative brainstorm definitely doesn't do. So no, I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, Ozan, so what I want to ask you now is these final two segments of the podcast, which are called Fill in the Blanks and the Final Five. So fill in the blanks is I read a sentence and you have to fill in the final word. And the final five I'll introduce straight after that. So are you ready?
Okay. Yep, ready.
So challenging conventional wisdom starts with
getting out of your jail cell.
Absorbing complex issues
begins with simplifying them.
Nice. Reframing a problem welcomes
better answers.
What impresses me most about humans is their ability to
adapt to the uncertain.
Nice. Good. Okay. These are your final five. So the final five, these are questions that are answered in one word to one sentence maximum. You're very good. You followed the rules, which is always wonderful. Not everyone always does. So I really appreciate that. So here we go. Some of these are a bit more personal. So if you feel the need to talk a bit more, you can. The first two, sure. Especially. How often do you walk Einstein, and do you find yourself to be more creative during those times with him?
Yeah, we walk him. My wife Kathy and I walk him once or twice a day at least, and absolutely, some of the best ideas I've had in recent memory have come during those walks because one, I'm stepping away from what I'm doing and actually letting my subconscious make connections. But also, I've got an amazing partner with me, a sounding board, who's asking me the right questions because she doesn't know what I'm working on. So she has that outsider perspective that we talked about, and she'll often help me see things that I'm missing.
I love that. That's beautiful. The second question is actually about her, because you start off the book dedicated to Kathy, and you say my cosmic constant. Yes. What was the thinking behind the use of that terminology? What does that mean to you?
It was a connection to the universe, of course, and thinking like a rocket scientist. And I've had so many changes in my life, coming from Turkey to the United States as an immigrant, and then from astrophysics to law, practicing lawyer to law professor, and then from law professor to popular author and speaker. So the ground underneath my feet has never been stable, really. And my whole life is just the change is the only, or it seems like change is the only constant. But there's another constant in my life, which is Kathy.
I love that, man. That's awesome. Weirdly enough, I also dedicated my book to my wife.
I love that.
Yeah, a few more similar. Mine says, to my wife, who's more monk than I'll ever be.
I love that so much.
Last 3 questions of the interview. What's something that you were once certain of that you recently changed your mind on?
I was certain once that science and spirituality could not be reconciled. And I've changed my opinion about that in the past, probably year or two, actually. I had this very materialistic view of the world, not in the monetary sense, but in the sense that like anything that's not subject to proof or disproof by the scientific method was not worth thinking about. And I don't think that anymore. I think science and spirituality, thinking like a monk and thinking like a rocket scientist can coexist in ways that are beneficial to both fields.
I love that. Couldn't agree with you more. Okay, last 2 questions. If you could create a law that everyone in the world would have to follow, what would it be?
Be kinder to one another. I know it sounds cliche, but it's so important to just be a little bit more kinder to one another and to see each other in a way that we don't see each other. We not looking at people like a commercial transaction, a business card, or the person standing in between you and your Starbucks macchiato, but actually seeing them as a human being who's experienced joy and sorrow, who's experienced triumph and grief, in all of their imperfect, beautiful glory. We don't do that. We just walk past people. We just see through each other as opposed to really see each other. And I think that would be the law I would create is requires to actually see each other.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And the 5th and final question is, what was your biggest lesson that you learned from the last 12 months?
Success doesn't make you happy. If you're not happy before success. And it's not that I wasn't happy. I think I've had this, and this isn't just 12 months, by the way, it's probably my whole life. I tied my self-worth around my accomplishments. And so I would sort of get a big dopamine hit whenever I succeeded at something. And I always thought that happiness was over the next mountain. And as long as I conquer this next thing, achieve the next milestone, that's going to bring me happiness. But if you're not happy before success, you're not going to be happy after success. And to me, happiness comes from not those big moments that you anticipate, going back to what we talked about before, but actually reorienting your focus toward the process, toward the little joys of life, like the joy of our morning walk with Einstein, the joy of my morning cup of coffee, the joy of an uninterrupted hour of writing. That's where happiness comes from. Happiness to me, it doesn't come from the big accomplishments, regardless of what it might look like from the outside.
Whenever we first admit that, it's hard to kind of stomach it sometimes, like I've also for a long time realized that in at least in my opinion, happiness and success are 2 different things. Yeah. And success is based on what I achieve, and happiness is based on how I feel about myself and how I feel about what I'm doing and contributing. And I don't think happiness, if you're happy, it makes you more successful. And I don't think if you're successful, it makes you happy. I think They are just what they are, and it's okay. Like I think I have dreams to be happy, and I also have dreams to be successful, and I have plans to be happy, and I have plans to be successful, and I see them as separate. They give me a different sense of meaning and fulfillment in different ways. And when you try and interconnect them, which is what I think you're saying, there's so many of us for so long believe that if we're successful, we'd be happy, or the opposite too, which is, if you're happy, then you'll be successful, and that's not true either. You know, it doesn't really matter, and you can define what each of them are for you. So no, thank you, Ozan. Thank you for sharing that, and really appreciate everyone. This is Ozan Varol and the book, Think Like a Rocket Scientist, simple strategies you can use to make giant leaps in work and life. You can go and grab a copy now. I obviously highly recommend this book. I think it's fascinating the way Ozan tells stories. He's a phenomenal writer. Of course, you can check out his blog as well. But the book definitely goes to that point of just crystallizing a lot of these really, really important and fascinating tips. And that's what I love about the book. It's like, it's stuff that will make sense, but it will be so much more practical and deeper for you as you dive in through the stories and the studies that Ozan makes really, really clear for us, like he's done today. Ozan, thank you so much for joining the On Purpose family. Really, really grateful to meet you. And I hope we actually get to meet in person one day too.
Yeah, I love that as well. You just live right down the coast here. And if I can say one more thing, Jay, I'd love to offer a special bonus to your audience for getting a copy of the book. If you head over to rocketsciencebook.com/purpose, you'll find 12 short videos that I recorded. These are like 3-minute bite-sized videos with practical, actionable insights from the book that you can implement right away. I'm also going to share with you a 30-minute productivity video that I have that takes you behind the scenes on sort of how I structure my days and how I get more done in less time. And you can find all of that at rocketsciencebook.com/purpose.
Thank you so much for offering that. I really, really appreciate it. And make sure you make the most of that. rocketsciencebook.com/purpose to get all of that information. And it's all free. So yeah, please go and grab it. Don't miss out on the opportunity. Of course, go and grab a copy of the book at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and I'm sure all other good bookshops. Thank you so much, Ozan. Thank you so much, man.
My pleasure, Jay. It was such a fun conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Hey everyone, my name's Jay Shetty and welcome to my YouTube channel. Every week I'm sharing 3 videos that are going to help you feel more fulfilled, feel more happy, and more successful. Make sure you subscribe to this channel so that you can find out about the videos as soon as they launch. Press the like button and leave a comment, and let's keep making wisdom go viral together. Make sure you subscribe.